Good evening. I'd like to call to order the April 2nd, 2012 meeting of the Joint Town Council Parking Authority for the Town of Los Gatos. Madam Clerk, may we have the call of the roll, please?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, and good evening. Councilmember Stephen Leonardis.
Here.
Councilmember Diane McNutt.
Here.
Councilmember Joe Przinski.
Here.
Vice Mayor Barbara Spector.
Here.
Mayor Steve Rice.
Here. As is our tradition, we like to have young people who have been identified as what we call future leaders to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance at our council meetings. So tonight, I'm pleased to introduce you to Erin Grasty, fifth grader at Van Meter Elementary School. You can start coming up. My alma mater. She's vice president of the K-Kids, which is sponsored by Kiwanis. Her favorite subjects are math, reading, and writing. She participated in the Math Olympiad. She's been a Girl Scout for 4 years, has played soccer for 6 years, gymnastics for 2 years, Girls on the Run for 3 years, and softball Little League for 3 years. She has played the piano for 3 years and clarinet for 1 year. You still have time for school? Okay. She wrapped eating utensils for a retirement center through K-Kids and conducts a book drive, or helped conduct a book drive for students in Africa, also through K-Kids. She likes to cook, enjoys arts and crafts, and caring for young children. Would you please stand and join Erin in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's give Erin a hand. Thank you very much. One more time, let's give her a round of applause. Next, it's my pleasure to read a proclamation, if this will stay. I'd like to ask our town poet laureate, Parthenia Hicks, to come forward. And we're going to talk about this being Poetry Month. And I have this proclamation for you, Parthenia. And it says, whereas National Poetry Month seeks to highlight the extraordinary legacy and ongoing achievement of poets, introduce people to the pleasures and benefits of reading poetry, bring poets and poetry to the public in innovative ways, and make poetry an important part of our children's lives. And whereas the town of Los Gatos has appointed Parthenia Hicks as Poet Laureate, who has in turn established the Poetry Los Gatos movement. And whereas the Poet Laureate and Poetry Los Gatos are engaged in efforts to make poetry an essential part of the arts and humanities in Los Gatos, affecting every aspect of life in Los Gatos, including education, the economy, and community pride. And whereas the town of Los Gatos, through the Los Gatos Public Library, has established a permanent webpage dedicated to introducing people to the poetry and activities of the town Poet Laureate. Now, therefore, be it resolved, I, Steve Rice, by virtue of the authority vested in me as mayor of the town of Los Gatos, do deem it appropriate and do hereby proclaim the month of April 2012 to be National Poetry Month within the town of Los Gatos and call upon all citizens to make poetry a part of their daily life in Los Gatos. Parthenia?
Thank you very much. And this is quite beautiful. I hope that you will stay to have a peek at it later. I want to say thank you on behalf of all the poets and writers in our town, and especially to Poetry Los Gatos, the group of poets, writers, and lovers of language who support me as your poet laureate. In a town that historically boasts its own Poets Canyon and poets Sarah Bard Field, Charles Erskine Scott Wood, as well as many visiting writers, including Ambrose Bierce, John Steinbeck, Frank Norris, whose books, incidentally, were published in the town of Los Gatos, and many others. It is an honor to be a part of carrying on and revitalizing a literary tradition in our town. In the past 2 years, Poetry Los Gatos has produced or participated in over 35 events. Most of these events have taken place in Los Gatos, and some right here in council chambers. The audience has come from our town, of course, but also San Jose, Campbell, Cupertino, and Santa Cruz. Our Monday night poetry group brings together both published and brand new poets, gathering to read work to each other and to offer encouragement and support for the unique way that language spills out of each one of us. It is open to all, no experience necessary. Hope to see you there. Our 2012 project is a collection of poems focused on the town of Los Gatos that will be published in the fall of this year. Please raise your hand if you have submitted a poem to that collection. All right, thank you very much. So far, approximately 75 people have submitted poems, and our youngest submission is from an 8-year-old girl, Maylin Dolman, who lives in Wyoming and wrote about riding her bike in Vasona with her grandfather while visiting her parents, Bob and Lori Lynch, who live in Los Gatos. And it is a complete coincidence and a grand coincidence that today I discovered that Maylin is actually here in town again today, visiting her grandparents. And in a moment, I'm going to read a few lines from the poem that she submitted. But first, I'd like to ask Maylin to please stand up. Thank you, Maylin. These lines from her poem entitled "To the Exposed Eye, Normal" are timeless and pure. The wavering shadow on the grass, smeared with green, I call my friend. It floats away with trails of wind tagging along. Perfection is the goose that is sitting on her nest, waiting, devoted. She will wait for 1,000,000 years. Thank you, Maylin. The majority of poems submitted to the collection are from people in our town who have seldom or never written poetry, writing about a particular Los Gatos experience or memory. Of course, it is also filled with poems from published poets, as well as some people who have moved away from our town and still carry a poetic torch for it. We plan to supplement the poems with photos and artwork created by our town's artists. Have you written your poem yet? Now I would like to ask a few people to please stand. Any members of Poetry Los Gatos, please stand up and remain standing. I know you're here. Any members of the Monday night poetry group, please stand up. Any other writers? I know you're here, Steve. Please stand up. If you are a writer or a poet, please stand up, whether we know you or not. Any artists or photographers? Now, I know that there are a few more poets here. I think some sitting right on the front row. I would like to ask you to please stand up. So what I want to say now is look around you, because this is the beautiful face of poetry and art in our town. And each one of these people represents many more poets, many more writers, and many more artists. And now, how about we all say thank you for living in a town with a mayor and a town council that supports the arts and all of us. Thank you so much.
All right, and keeping with the poetry theme for the moment, I'm going to ask Joanne Talasfor to come forward, and she's going to introduce us to Mason, Elaine, and D'Angelo. You can come up here.
Thank you very much. I am Joanne Talasfor, and as the arts coordinator for Los Gatos Union School District, it's my pleasure to celebrate the practice of the arts in poetry in our classrooms. And then to introduce you to the 3 8th grade students from Fisher Middle School who were in the classes of Ms. Cossetti, Ms. Karlstrom, and Ms. Donatelli Sardo. All 3 students were asked to write poems in the classes upon being inspired by the writer and teacher George Ella and her poem, Where I Am From. And so the question of where you are from reaches deep inside, unlocking each student's unique experience. And I hope perhaps that after you listen to them, you'll think about your own experience and where you're from. Anyway, we'll start with D'Angelo, then we'll go to Mason Bad, and then we'll close out with Elaine Shea. Thank you.
Oops. I am D'Angelo Reyes, and I wrote the poem in which I called I Am From a Family of Filipino Spirit. I am from egg rolls with a side of rice, to deliciousness we have in every meal that keeps us wanting to have more before heading to the door. I am from a family that has a lot of Filipino spirit, that is supportive and creative, that will always move this family into succession and no to recession. I am from a place of bright beaches. People enjoy the palm trees. Water cascades over the golden sand as we roll into one. I am from being taught math, English, science, and history before at a Catholic school, going every Sunday for Mass to learn about the Word of God. Reaching high to sing amen, Dad's echoing his song of praise. I am from thinking creative, using those ideas for creating a lovely picture, expressing my talents as it exudes in disbelief. I am from sitting at home playing video games, most of the time doing my homework, going on fascinating trips to the Philippines to see my relatives, but went to Hawaii for a change. I am from singing melodic songs or serving in a competitive tennis match, jumping to the tunes of excitement as I defeat my opponent. I am from lessons of discipline, having memories that I will be able to cherish, scores of love and care, the tradition I carry forever.
Hi, I am Mason Babb, and this is my Where I'm From poem. I am from my backyard, from swing sets, slides, green grass, and lots of fun playing tag with my friends. I am from the kitchen, from the scent of my dad's famous meatloaf for dinner and wonderful smell of his sausage, gravy, and biscuits in the morning. I am from drum sets, from the crashing of the cymbals and the banging of the drums. I am from Los Gatos, from the nice restaurants like Willow Street and Forbes Mill, and the sun is always shining almost as bright as the stars at night. I am from my memories, from playing in the backyard with my dog when I was little and skateboarding in the front yard today.
I am Elaine Shea, and this is my Where I'm From poem. I am from my backyard, from broken tables, old bikes, from old fish bowls and a fishing rod I've never used, to old soil and dead leaves on the wall. I am from the kitchen, from foods like pasta, sushi, and cookies, from the taste of many types of ice cream, to the smell of fruits like peaches and oranges. I am from my room, from stuffed animals and books, from blankets petite and huge, to boxes full of what others call trash that I keep. I am from secret places, from journals, from notebooks with my drawings, pictures, and words, to pictures of me at almost all ages. I am from my mother, my father, from 15 cousins, 8 girls and 7 boys, to stories about life in Taiwan. I am from my memories, from a massive family spread apart, and an infinite amount of different memories, to feeling squished into a box where sometimes I cannot think straight.
Thank you, Joanne, and thank you, students. Let's give them one more round of applause. And now, while I walk slowly or quickly, the closed session report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. The council met in closed session as duly noticed on the closed session agenda tonight. They took no action, and there's nothing to report out this evening.
Thank you. Okay, next we're going to have a short presentation from the West Valley Community College District bond measure regarding the West Valley Mission Community College District bond measure. Lori Gaskin, the West Valley Community College president, and Adrian Gray, chair of the District Board of Trustees.
Thank you so much, Mayor Rice, and I extend heartfelt greetings from West Valley College to Vice Mayor Spector as well as to town council members. It is a delight to be here this evening, and I have a very brief presentation. Both Board President Gray and I will be sharing this quite briefly. I wanted to just begin by recognizing what the depths and the roots of education provide. This is such a celebratory way for us to provide you with this presentation on the heels of this poetry and this celebration of innovation as well as creativity in our region. So I thank you very much. My comment today is focused on the investment in our community's future. And I wanted to remind Town Council and to your listening audience that West Valley and Mission Community College District is a 2-college district serving the towns of Los Gatos, as well as the cities of San Jose, Santa Clara, Monte Sereno, Saratoga, Campbell, and portions of Sunnyvale. We are one of the 112 community colleges. West Valley is, and then with Mission, 2 of the 112 community colleges. And collectively, as a system, we serve 2.6 million students in the state. At West Valley College, we serve 11,000 of those students, and we take great pride, honor, and privilege in being able to provide higher education, affordable, accessible higher education to our community members. If you take a look at West Valley College, we are sited on 143 acres, bounded by Fruitvale and Allendale, and we are blessed with what I call 3 Ps: our programs, our people, and our sense of place. And tonight, I wanted to comment on our programs and our people very briefly, and then focus principally on our sense of place. We have been incredible stewards of the public's trust. We provide an educational need to fulfill higher education within the 4 communities that we particularly serve at West Valley College, principally with transfer preparation and career and technical education. We provide access to higher education, most notably because we are affordable and we are in your backyard. And then finally, what West Valley College has is the hallmark, the distinction of academic excellence. It's a tradition that we value, and it's one that we further in everything that we do. So when I comment about our 3 Ps, our programs, our people, and our place, I wanted to just briefly remind you that we are the institution that provides freshman and sophomore level education so that our students, hundreds of them, transfer and can transfer to public and private 4-year institutions across the nation, but most notably in California. In addition, we offer some extremely unique career and technical education programs, and those are highlighted on the screen behind me. But I did want to comment on our sense of place, because that place has been well loved for over 4 decades by hundreds of thousands of students. And when I say well loved, I mean it has been used and used and used to the point that we are in a set of buildings. I have 18 buildings that are no younger than 38 years of age. And as a consequence, we are here before you to share with you the Measure C movement that we are proceeding with in our June 2012 ballot. Back in 2004, the community was kind enough to support Measure H, which provided $235 million to the 2 colleges, Mission College and West Valley, to upgrade facilities. At West Valley, we received $97 million of that $235 million, and we were able to touch 3 buildings, and we renovated those. We don't believe in necessarily knocking them down and rebuilding because we can stretch our funds more when we renovate. So we took our highest need complexes and we renovated those. In addition, we built the first 2 new buildings in 38 years on campus, a science lab and then a technology center. And we did a tremendous amount of infrastructure upgrade, which is not done. If you've been on the campus of West Valley College, you know it's very difficult to get around because back in the late 60s, we didn't think about ADA accessibility and things of that sort. And these are pictures of the renovated facilities there. Whoops, I'm sorry, I was going too fast. They're very bright. They're what the learners in today's world expect when they go on to higher education. But our future is that I have 15 buildings that remain in need of upgrading, again, that are no younger than 18 years of age. And we do not have educational facilities in those 15 buildings that are conducive to teaching and learning. Particularly, it's because it's antiquated, old, both the infrastructure, the technology, and the learning environment itself. And so these are simply pictures of the facilities. We've been stewards of the taxpayers' dollar. We've kept abreast of trying to maintain the facilities, but again, when you've been well loved by hundreds of thousands of students, it becomes a little difficult to maintain the infrastructure as broad as we have it. So I wanted to just comment before I turn it over to Board President Gray. In front of you, you have a sheet, a yellow sheet, which identifies the projects that we would be funding with new Measure C, as well as the ballot language in your white packet. And then I'll defer to Board President Gray.
So seeing the need of the colleges and understanding the value that they bring to the community, our Board of Trustees has approved a $350 million Prop 39 facilities bond that will be on the June 5th ballot. And we've been going to our local community. That decision was supported by polling that took place a little bit longer than 4 months ago. that identified strong support in the community for our community colleges, for the idea of higher education, particularly on the West Valley side of our district, the cities of Los Gatos, Campbell, Montessorino, and Saratoga. We had very strong support. In fact, I found out that the city of Los Gatos actually has a favorable view of West Valley College at the highest level of all the cities and towns polled, that 91% of folks who live in the town of Los Gatos view West Valley College favorably, so we're very pleased about that. We know that these cities and towns believe that it's critically important to maintain affordable higher education and keep this access, and that they trust our West Valley Mission Community College District to use those funds properly. So we're going to the folks in our district, the city councils, chambers of commerce, and so on, and seeking endorsement. And that's what we're here to ask of you today, is the endorsement of the town of Los Gatos for our measure, your assistance in spreading the word of the good work that we do at West Valley College, and how these funds will help us to continue to do that work in decades to come. Are there any questions that we can answer for you?
Any questions of council? I think we're good.
Okay, thank you. And just a comment, of the 15 buildings that remain untouched, this bond would touch 14 of them. The only building that would remain untouched is where my office is, and that is unimportant. It is unimportant in the scheme of things. So, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
Okay, we're going to move on next. First of all, although I have a number of them, if you plan to speak tonight on any item, please fill out one of these little buff-colored cards that's in the bench back in front of you, and turn it in to the clerk on my left, your right, and we'll get you in line. Next is council and manager matters. Any matters from members of council? Seeing none, manager matters.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, just a few quick items. The state, as you know, has eliminated redevelopment agencies as of February 1st, and there are successor agencies that the town has stepped into playing that role. And our first meeting of the Los Gatos Redevelopment Agency Successor Agency Oversight Board will be tomorrow here in the council chambers at 1:30. And we'll be reviewing with the Oversight Board the tremendous history of redevelopment in Los Gatos, including the reconstruction of streets and landscaping and parks in downtown, following the Loma Prieta earthquake, to the construction of our police operations building on the boulevard, and to the opening of the library just 2 months ago. That has been to such wide acclaim. And we'll be reviewing that history and also talking to the board about the need to finish the library project and adjacent Pageant Park, as well as potential funding for Almond Grove, which is the council's next highest priority for the redevelopment district. Second, the Youth Commission is again seeking applications for next year's appointments. Applications for the Youth Commission are due by Wednesday, May 9th. And we're also always looking for a tremendous array of applicants, not only for the Youth Commission, but also the seats on the Community Services Commission and the Parks Commission. Third, at your last meeting, you directed staff to proceed with the community outreach process to gather community input on potential use of areas of our parks for certain times of day for off-leash dogs. We have now set 3 community meetings. All will be held at Van Meter School in the auditorium, starting at 6 p.m. on April 25th, May 9th, and May 23rd. So those community meetings are now set and will be on the town website. Last, on March 5th, there was an explosion in the Bellwood neighborhood on West Hill. No cause has yet been identified, but our police emergency preparedness sergeant is supporting county fire and PG&E in identifying the next steps and solutions for that incident. That concludes staff report.
Okay, thank you. And tonight's Did You Know? Gosh, maybe a theme here. on poetry with our poet laureate, Parthenia Hicks.
Good evening again. Did you know that this Thursday, April 5th, from 6 to 8 p.m., Poetry Los Gatos will present Exposures, the Los Gatos poets responding to the art of photography. In fact, the photography that is on exhibit right now, tonight, in this room. Did you know that on Friday night, April 20th, Poetry Los Gatos will feature a poetry movie night and show the film Il Postino, in which an Italian postman learns to love poetry while delivering mail to Pablo Neruda. Neruda's poetry and a brief discussion of his life will take place before the film. This will be held at the Adult Recreation Department right across the street. Popcorn will be served, so bring a friend and you can make it a date night. Did you know that Tuesday, April 24th, brings the return of our most popular event from last year, the community open mic at the Great Bear Cafe, open to poets, writers, and non-writers. Read a poem of your own or one that you love. Did you know that all of these events are free and open to the public? For more information, go to the Town Council site, look for the library, and go to the Poet Laureate page. Or go to Facebook at Los Gatos Poet Laureate, or you can contact me personally at parthenia1@mac.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Parthenia. Next is consent items. We have 2 items on our consent agenda, and I've had a request to pull item number 2, and from a member of council, and a member of the public wishes to speak on item number 1. So we're going to pull that. So we will hear the consent calendar after our public hearings this evening. Next is verbal communications. This allows anybody to speak for up to 3 minutes on any matter that is not on tonight's agenda. I have 1 card, and that is Patty Elliott.
Good evening. I'm Patty Elliott. I live on Marchmont Drive, and I just realized I have another Did You Know for you, which is, did you know that the Hillbrook School is running a recreation department up at the school after the regular school day? In fact, that's what Hillbrook has been doing over the last 3 or 4 years, slowly but significantly expanding its programs to the point where it has inundated the neighborhoods with extensive traffic all afternoon and into the evening. Hillbrook's website describes the situation this way, quote, "When the school day ends, a whole new world begins at Hillbrook, full of classes, activities, and fun." The website then lists 27 different activities, not including Hillbrook sports teams. Those activities include acting, beginning sign language, beginning soccer, beginning Spanish for adults, ceramics, cooking, drama, fencing, clay for adults, woodshop, hip-hop, rock band, etc. Doesn't that sound like the Los Gatos Saratoga Recreation Department brochure? Including adult classes. What does this all mean for the neighborhood? Traffic, and lots of it, all afternoon and into the evening. You can also discover the traffic burden by looking at the Hillbrook website regarding its athletic programs. For its 90 middle school students, Hillbrook has 7 basketball teams, and this past basketball season hosted 62 home basketball games. Between the away schools' athletes and parents and the Hillbrook parents coming to watch those games, our neighborhood experiences heavy Hillbrook traffic during all of those 62 home games, in addition to all the other sports Hillbrook hosts as well. By contrast, the Fisher Middle School, with over 1,000 students, has 4 basketball teams and hosts 21 home games. Although Hillbrook is required by its CUP to promote and maintain a carpooling program, the head of the school told neighbors at a meeting in January that afternoon carpooling for Hillbrook simply is not feasible because so many of the kids are involved in after-school programs at the school. In fact, Hillbrook since 2007 hasn't even bothered to file its twice annual required carpool report. So more things to know. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, Ms. Holly? Okay, thank you very much. Next, we're going to move on to public hearings. Item number 3 on the agenda, this is architecture and site applications S-6-046 and S-6-064. Lot line adjustment application M-06-09, variance application V-11-001, and negative declaration applications ND-08-002 and ND 08-003, property location 339 and 341 Bella Vista Avenue. Property owner applicant Dan Ross and Jake Peters. The appellant is Dan Ross. We're going to start with the staff report from Suzanne Avila.
Good evening. The project site is on the west side of Bella Vista, just north of Charles Street. The zoning is R18. These two lots are both smaller than that, and they are therefore non-conforming. The property is within the hillside area, and as such is subject to the hillside development standards and guidelines. There is one distinction to that. We have an FAR formula in the town code that applies to R1 zone properties, and then there is also a allowable floor area in the hillside development standards and guidelines. The R1 FAR formula was applied to these properties because it is more restrictive. The lot sizes are currently just over 6,000 and just over and about 4,100 square feet. The applicant is proposing to do a lot line adjustment to make them a little more equivalent in size. The proposed sizes would be 5240 and 4915. There are 2 architecture and site applications for 2 new residences, the lot line adjustment application, a variance application for reduced driveway lengths, and there are also some exceptions being requested to the hillside development standards and guidelines for grading, cut and fill, and to develop outside the LRDA because there is essentially no LRDA on these properties. And we do have a couple of reduced setbacks requested on each lot. A side in front on 341 Bella Vista and a front and rear at 339. The applicant is also requesting to exceed the allowable FAR. Each house is required to have 2 parking spaces, so if there is not a garage or carport, there still needs to be parking spaces, so we still have the need for driveway and access to the properties, even if there weren't a garage or carport constructed. The Planning Commission considered the applications on October 12, 2011, and again on February 8th of this year. The commission determined that the applicant had not complied with the direction they received on October 12th, and the significant one being that they wanted to see a reduction in house sizes. The commission decided to deny the applications, and they also cited concerns about bulk and mass, safety on Bella Vista, and a concern about the setback reduction on 339. The commission's decision was appealed by the applicant, which leads us to this evening. The council has multiple options on this appeal, or there's actually 2 appeals, because there are 2 applications. One would be to deny the appeal in the applications. The next would be to either grant the appeal, and you could potentially approve the applications, or you could remand it to the Planning Commission for further work. There are draft resolutions attached to the staff report for each of these options. And that concludes staff's report. I do have an engineering staff available if you have engineering-related questions, and otherwise I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions of staff? Seeing none. We'll move to the applicant, or the appellant, I should say. Mr. Ross, you'll have 10 minutes to make your presentation.
Thank you. My name is Dan Ross. I live at 188 Villa Avenue in Los Gatos. And in the spirit of the agenda items earlier tonight, they were very high level and quick. So I'm going to try to continue that theme. We were denied at the Planning Commission level for comments regarding our current square footage of 2,400 square feet, and our plans are currently at 1,803 square feet for 339 Bella Vista. And we made comments that we would reduce 341 Bella Vista to that same square footage. We left a difference in the two floor plans just to offer contrast between both houses had the similar floor plan as 341. We reduced 339. And we left 341 as it was just to show the visual difference. But we did state that we were willing to reduce that square footage. Another topic that came up at the Planning Commission was variance relating to the back of the site, which that's technically an exception for 339. We were asking for a setback exception, not a variance. Another issue that came up with the Planning Commission was safety concerns on Bella Vista. Today I was able to submit a letter as a desk item, which I think you all have copies of, which was a 5-year traffic report, we did a public record search through Los Gatos PD to list traffic citations and accidents on Bella Vista Avenue, primarily from the Highway 9 bridge north. It took a while for that data to come in. We just got it about a week ago, so we were able to turn that in today. And it showed, you can see from the report, primarily stop sign violations at Caldwell, which is a few blocks north of us. There were no identified citations or accidents near our site. Another part of the appeal process that we learned is the ability to introduce new information, that letter being one. Since our last meeting with the Planning Commission, I've had time to meet with our architect, and we do see that we can make some improvements on the floor plan to reduce the square footage and address the setback exception that was needed for 339 Bella Vista. So I'm going to cut my presentation short with the notion that we would like to continue that conversation. If there are, this is a fairly complicated application, so I'd like to reserve the right to have additional dialogue at the end of the public comments to answer any of the more technical questions. Lastly, at the Planning Commission meetings, we've had about 35 people at each meeting that are in support of what we've been doing here. And they're here tonight. We've got a group, the majority of them won't speak, just for the sake of time, but they're here just out of a sense of fairness and balance. And that's really where I'm going to leave it for right now, and I'd like the opportunity to answer questions after the public comments.
Questions of the applicant at this time? Seeing none, you will have a 5-minute period after the public speaks to rebut anything that is said at that time. And of course, if we have any questions, the council will ask you at that time as well.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Can I ask, I'm curious, the appellant indicated there are members of the audience that are in support. Would it be appropriate through the mayor to see who in the audience is represented by that statement?
If you'd like to have them.
You folks want to raise their hand or stand? It's a lighter crowd tonight, but.
Okay, thank you.
The majority of being residents in town. I do have 3 friends here this evening that live out of town, and that was the case at the last meeting. The neighbors thought that maybe some of the people were from out of town. So, thank you.
Thanks. Okay, I do have a number of cards on this, and I'm not inclined to cut the amount of time short. You will have 3 minutes, but what I'm going to ask is if you don't need to use all the 3 minutes, don't feel obligated to stay there for 3 minutes. And I'll call a couple of names at a time so that you can be ready, maybe move towards the front and be ready when it's your turn. We'll start with Forrest Strait, and then next will be Vitaly Stulsky.
Forest Strait, 146 Maggie. I'm a builder, developer. I've built high-rise office buildings in California, Arizona, Nevada, San Francisco to San Diego. All these places have standards, codes, rules, and let me just say that what I'm going to do, let me just call them rules. One rule, just as an aside, is I built a couple buildings, a restaurant and a garage below Coit Tower. The rule was 33 feet. We built it 33 feet. The other rules is, let's say some of the homes on Bella Vista or ours were built under rules maybe 1950, 60, 70. Those were rules then. Today, the rules are Los Gatos rules today. Among other things for our rules would be that the project, according to Los Gatos rules, 700 plus or minus square foot. That's what the rules are. Current plans behind you on a different subject show the house behind me is elevation 112.5. My patio, my front door is at elevation 50. 62 and a half feet difference. Just approximately from you to about the third row is the distance from my house. I'm 6 foot. This is probably 12 foot. Multiply that by 4. Look at the third row, and that's what I'm looking at. Most of you have been out to the site. The hill behind me is at an elevation about like this. The house that I'll be looking at is up like this. I mean, that's why we have rules. That's why we have FAR. That's why we have hillside rules in Los Gatos.
Thank you. Any questions of Mr. Strait? Nope. Thank you. Vitaly Stulsky, followed by Mary Badami.
Hello, my name is Vitaly Stulsky. I'm the owner of 152 Maggie Court, where I live with my wife and kids. We are extremely concerned about this project because it affects us directly in the areas of privacy, basically noise, light, visibility into our property, violation of hillside guidelines and regulations, environmental impact, cutting trees, making huge grade cuts, etc. Financial impact, significant loss to every property around the proposed construction. Safety, having oversized structure sitting on the 50% slope very close to our house doesn't look very safe to me. I totally support the unanimous decision made by the Planning Commission to deny this project. In addition to that, I'd like to note that April 3rd, 2003, almost exactly 9 years ago, it was a town council meeting with the appeal for the denied project at 339 Bella Vista, the very same property that we are talking about today. Then Planning Commission unanimously denied the project and directed applicant that, and I quote, home and garage shall not exceed the FAR and be compatible with the characteristics and the conditions of the lot. And the reason for the appeal, the Planning Commission erred and abused the discretion, and the conclusion to this meeting was the site is extremely challenging and future application will need to be carefully reviewed. So 9 years from that, despite the fact that the clearest possible message was sent, shall not exceed FAR. We are going through the very same process again. I believe the applicant clearly knew the outcome of that hearing, but chose to apply for the houses that more than significantly exceed the FAR. So in addition to denying this appeal, I also would like to ask the Planning Commission, city staff, mayor, council members, to send a clear message to future applicants that for challenging sites like this, if anything can be built on such sites, should be fully compliant with existing rules and regulations. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? None? Okay. Next is Mary Badami, to be followed by Patrick Tillman.
Good evening, council members. Mary Badami, 150 Maggie Court. Mr. Ross did not have to buy these particular lots. There were other lots for sale in 2004. Larger lots, less constrained lots, lots that could accommodate the size of homes he'd like to build. He chose the Blue Light Special, a discounted price likely due to the restrictions that ran with the land. restrictions even more regulated with the adoption of the hillside standards and guidelines. His unwillingness to follow the FAR is not a hardship, it's self-created. Findings for an exception to the FAR cannot be justified under Code Section 29.40.075. I refer to items number 1C and item number 2. In support, the consulting town architect, Larry Cannon, stated that the houses will, I believe, be very visible from the neighborhood below the sites. The town environmental consultant, Gear and Gear, also stated that with such extensive tree removal, the homes will directly overlook the existing townhomes. Clearly, the town consultants have reinforced that these homes will have a significant visual impact to neighboring properties. Accordingly, the criteria for granting an exception to the FAR cannot be met. I also refer to pages 29 and 30 of the Hillside Standards in regard to the exceptions to maximum floor area. We're thankful to the Planning Commission for doing an outstanding job. They were kind enough to give Mr. Ross a second opportunity to reduce the size of his homes, something the neighborhood that had been asking him to do that for 4 years. To undermine their competency with an appeal citing incorrect facts, reasons not substantiated by fact, or perception is disrespectful and downright spin. Case in point, the applicant's justification for exceeding the FAR is based on perception rather than fact. Yet, in his argument for a driveway variance, perception is now inconsequential, and now he wants fact. The spin needs to stop. There is no compelling reason to justify deviating from town code, the general plan, the residential design standards, or the hillside standards and guidelines. Please deny the appeal and uphold the decision of the Planning Commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you. Patrick Tillman, followed by Aaron Johnson.
Good evening. My name is Pat Tillman. I live at 150 Maggie Court.
Could you raise the mic? Thank you.
Okay, good. My name is Pat Tillman. I live at 150 Maggie Court, and my concern here, actually following Mary, is her reference to incorrect facts. My concern is that the residents, in particular us, have not been properly served by our planning department. Instead of enforcing the rules, the laws, the regulations, they have found a way of designing their way around it and getting out of it. Specific challenges to the mitigated negative declaration and the staff report I've already submitted. It's my apologies, it's kind of lengthy, but I have a lot of objections to what they did. My first letter was July 1st, 2011, followed by January 17, 2012. I hope you get a chance. In any case, we should not, as residents, have to hire architects, arborists, specialists to come in and undo or challenge what our planning department has done. It appears more that they have been advocates for Mr. Ross than supporting our laws and regulations, and that's put us at a disadvantage. As well, this latest council agenda report seems to be more of the same. I have a couple of examples for you. First one is on page 2 in the background section. The agenda makes reference to 3 reasons for turning down the application. That would be driveway safety concerns, reduced rear yard setback, sizes of homes versus a directive to substantially reduce. There were only 3 reasons stated. What was left out were a lot line variance that is not justified, cannot be legally justified. FAR is exceeded by 3-4 times, depending on how you want to look at it. Bulk and mass, it's a 3-story building. The height exceeds, and the neighborhood resistance to this project. Those were specific reasons for turning down this application that are in the transcript at pages 50 to 59, and those have been left out. I have 2 more, the lot line adjustment, more specifically the driveway length. I think it should be mentioned that when he's looking for he has a 3-foot setback, 15 of the 18 feet of his driveway belongs to the town. I don't think he should be given that, Ron. 80% of his front yard belongs to the town. That's part of his project. I have a lot of specifics. I'd appreciate it if you would. I have 20 more seconds. I'd appreciate it if you would read those letters because I put some time into them. Their final comment had to do with this particular project will not act as a precedent. They've been picking and choosing things that don't apply to make this. The law doesn't apply to them, so they're looking for precedents to justify what they're doing, and it doesn't fit.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Tillman. Any questions? Okay, Aaron Johnson, followed by Tim Coughlin.
Hi, my name is Erin Johnson, and I live at 150 Maggie Court. Here we are again, the third time in this chamber discussing the same issue. Why? I see it as a continued sign of defiance. It's disrespectful to town officials. It's wasteful of town resources. We have a town code, not unlike the vehicle code or penal code. Again, I'm baffled as to why Mr. Ross considers himself exempt. I find it arrogant, equivalent to being above the law. These exceptions, waivers, favors, or whatever you want to call them, are not justified. They are based on greed. I was born, raised, and still live in Los Gatos, and this is not representative of my town. I hope that our town government is able to recognize the absurdity of this project and deny the appeal. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Tim Coughlin, followed by Annie Harris.
Good evening, Tim Coughlin. I'm at 320 Bella Vista, directly across from the subject properties. By the way, they should probably be 319 and 321 or something like that. I don't know how they got number 340 across from our house, 320. Anyhow, I'm encouraging you to uphold the decision of the Planning Commission. I think if you grant the appeal, you have to find that they acted in error, and I don't see that you have that finding. So I'd like to just reemphasize some of these points here. I'll try to keep it brief, but I think it's just important for you to uphold the decision, not only because it's the correct decision, but because this sets a precedent for future action. And I think there's just no question that they made the right decision.
Thank you. Annie Harris, followed by William Schweikert.
I'm Annie Harris. I live at 316 Bella Vista Avenue. I've been there for 40 years. I think this project is a bad idea. One person stands to gain financially at everyone else's expense. The former owner was turned down, and I would recommend this project be turned down. Excuse me. The oak trees have been thriving for my 40 years here, and now they are in question. 9 years ago, they were deemed healthy, and now they are not. My Maggie Court neighbors are pre-existing, and the privacy issue is huge. It's huge. In my opinion, it would be a crime to alter this green belt.
Okay, William Schweikert, followed by Ian McCrae.
Good evening, council members. I'm William Schweikert. I live at 144 Maggie Court. I'm opposed to this project. I'm opposed to this project because of the removal of so many trees, the unsafe blind walking conditions these homes create for pedestrians and cyclists, the no parking for visitors of these homes, contributing to further safety concerns, the unsightly tall prison-like rear view that the Maggie Court residents will have to look at every day. Remember, they're looking up at a hill. And that's the beautiful front view of the homes. The back has no room for yard, so it's just solid concrete with windows. Loss of privacy for Maggie Court residents, Further hillside safety issues like erosion, runoff, and earthquake. For the record, these properties are unfit for development, as evidenced by the number of requests for FARs and concessions. Mr. Ross has ignored the Planning Commission's recommendations. The Los Gatos Planning Commission unanimously, let me say that again, unanimously voted against this project because it did not adhere to the residential standards and ordinances. I ask the council to deny this appeal because there's no justification for supporting it and uphold the findings of the Town Planning Commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Ian McCrae, followed by Lee Quintana.
Hello, Ian McCrae, 350 Bella Vista. I've been a resident and a realtor since 1978, and I must compliment you on the spirit of with which the meeting began, with the kids and the poets and all that. I don't know Mr. Ross well enough to know him or dislike him or like him, but there's good news and there's bad news. So I'll start with the bad news. The bad news is that for whatever reason, Mr. Ross has decided that he should triple the FAR with a project that is virtually a cliff and with a development that requires variances, setback annulments, for lack of a better word, and so many other concessions that it's almost ridiculous. And in the, to the merit of the Planning Commission, they saw through the charade and denied it. But there's good news for Mr. Ross, actually. If he were actually to enjoy the fact that he's still able to build something on this cliff and could be approved if he adhered to the FAR and the setbacks, he could still build a 700 to 800 square foot home on each lot, which would be marketable in this town and would actually, and I'm speaking as a realtor now, would actually be marketable and would provide a market segment to this town, which is in demand. We could actually sell these 700 to 800 square foot, call them patio homes for lack of a better term, and he could probably enjoy price ranges in the $700 to $900 price range. Whether that makes economic sense is really beside the point. That's what the town has said are the rules. They are marketable, could be sold, and it would provide some housing for people who otherwise couldn't afford 2,400 square foot homes, which are clearly beyond the scope of what's available and appropriate for this site. So I would request of the town council that you uphold the Planning Commission's mandate and make a good common sense decision here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Lee Quintana, followed by Andy Wu.
Lee Quintana, 5 Palm Avenue. Just like to say I'm in agreement with practically everything that's been said prior to my coming up. Like to say that if you read the Hillside Design Guidelines, the forward, the vision, the objectives, the building site selection section, the development intensity section, and the design objectives, it's hard to understand how you can make the finding that this project is consistent with the Hillside standards and guidelines. Specifically, on page 29, the exceptions to maximum floor area, it states that all of the following conditions need to be met in order to grant an exception. And it doesn't say you have to grant the exception even if they're all met. It just says you may approve it. But number 2, no significant impact to trees. Number 3, no grading necessary to accommodate building area that exceeds the FAR. Number 4, all standards and applicable guidelines are being met. Number 5 and 6 have to be met by every single development in town. Number 8, a significant seller element is included in design unless it conflicts with other standards, which I believe it does. And number 9, there will not be a significant visual impact on neighboring properties. None of those have been met. As far as the architecture goes, it's already been stated that it will be highly visible from below. It does have the appearance of 3 stories. This is an extremely steep slope. There is nothing on the property that is within the LRDA or even close to the LRDA of 30%, and that in itself is an indication of the severe constraints that this project has. Okay. I think that even if you can rationale and justify each one of the exceptions, variances, et cetera, individually, when you take the whole project together, clearly it just does not meet the standards of the Hillside Design Guidelines or the general plan. I'd also like to just make a very brief comment about livability. Somebody brought that up at the last meeting. And I'm just going to give you a really extreme example of what is livable. For 2 years, I lived in a 230 square foot studio apartment with a very small kitchen with the sun. Oh, shoot.
Thank you, Ms. Quintana.
That wasn't what I wanted to say. I had a better example.
Okay,
than
Andy
that.
Wu, followed by Eleanor Leishman.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I'll finish Ms. Quintana's statement. When I was growing up, my father was a graduate student at USC. We lived in about a 250 square foot studio apartment. That was 3 of us, and we did just fine. But that aside, I was going over the staff's recommendation initially for a soft approval, and 2 things struck out at me. One was the statement that Mr. Ross's development was within the size range for that neighborhood. And yes, I do recall that, but the administrative record showed that his developments are on the extreme high end of that range. The second is that grading and cut fill exceptions are warranted. Well, yes, because the entire lot it has a slope of greater than 30 degrees. Somebody mentioned a cliff, and I thought that was very interesting because I thought this is a nice overwatch position. If you had a trench slit on the lip of that cliff, you'd be able to look down on every single house and every single window below. I've looked at it, and you can see every single house. And as Mr. Ross at one point stated, there's no way to screen for the view from those houses that he intends to build to the houses below. If you can see the houses below, they can see you up top as well. But let me get to the issues on appeal, and I believe that, and I'm not the appellate expert, but on appeal, Mr. Ross is limited to the issues that he can present to this council and to have this council consider. And he states 4 bases for his appeal, and those 4 bases constitute either what he claims as reversible error or abuse of discretion. Now, in order to satisfy, I believe, an abuse of discretion standard, he'd have to prove by clear and convincing evidence that the Planning Commission somehow was unduly influenced by the public's presence, which is what he's stating. Put it another way, he has to have unequivocal evidence that the Planning Commission was swayed by the neighborhood outrage or opposition to this project. And I saw nothing in any of the statements or in the administrative record to indicate that the Planning Commission was at all swayed by public dissent. In fact, I believe they were swayed by his other 3 points, which he claims is error. 1, that the sizes of the homes were improperly classified as being 2,400 square feet. 2, that he did not request a variance for the rear yard setback. And 3, that there was a misconception of the safety issues within the neighborhood. Well, those, as I read it, all sound in error. So let me address those issues one by one really quickly. Mr. Ross makes a point that, was that it?
I'm afraid that's time.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Wu. Eleanor Leishman, and followed by Roxanne Jensen.
Good evening. My name is Eleanor Leishman, and I live at 332 Bella Vista Avenue. It's about 60 feet on the east side of the proposed, the northernmost of the two proposed houses. And my family moved to this house on Bella Vista in 1959. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that whole experience of growing up on the street and watching it change. But my main three objectives quickly would be to touch on a few things from a Bella Vista neighborhood perspective. One is the preservation of the oak trees, which is a big concern. Two would be the parking, on-street parking, which is already pretty problematic and a minor issue, but just something I'd like to touch on. And three would be the traffic safety, which I hope I have a minute to address. So growing up on the street, it was really a wonderful childhood, actually, moving there and going to Van Meter, finishing up Van Meter, going to University Avenue. We would walk down Bella Vista. There was a big oak tree growing right in the middle of the street, right near the bridge. The bridge had just gone in sometime in the 50s. And the pathway to Los Gatos, to downtown, is just fabulous. It was then, and it still is now, in spite of more traffic and more infill. So I really hope that we can preserve that beautiful vista and that experience of really walking down a country lane practically, which is so lovely and so rare. The oak trees are treasures. We have a 200-year-old oak tree on our property, and they're going to outlive us all, the ones that survive. So I really think that having smaller houses on the proposed properties would allow some of those heritage oaks to live on and to provide screening from the people, for the neighbors below and the neighbors above, and habitat, and would live on for future generations. So in summary, I'm not going to get to talk about the parking, about the parking or the traffic, but there is a significant traffic issue, especially with people from those proposed houses pulling out into a blind dogleg on Bella Vista, and it is a concern, and I think the Planning Commission was concerned about it, and anyone who wants to ignore that, I think, does so at their own peril. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Roxanne Jensen, followed by Rob DiNapoli.
Good evening, Mayor Rice and council members. I'm Roxanne Jensen. I live at 5691 Parkcrest Drive in San Jose, part-time. I am not a resident of Los Gatos, but I do have ties to this community. My son Jake Peters is one of the owners of the lots. He owns one of the lots, and Dan Ross is my nephew. I'm inspired to add my words to the discussion that has been going on, not because I believe that what I have to say will make a difference in the decision-making, but because I believe it's essential that citizens stand up for what they perceive is right action. In that arena, participation itself is a victory. The process I've observed thus far through the Planning Commission in regard to this project seems very discouraging to me. I see well-organized group opposition to the efforts of a family to build a home that will meet ordinary market standards. I'm surprised at the level of hostility and self-righteousness that's been directed at Dan Ross. There seems to be a lack of common courtesy in this whole regard. It's my understanding that the Bella Vista Condos project benefited from exceptions their builder received. Specifically, the Bella Vista Condo project was granted setback exceptions, driveway variance, allowance to exceed floor-to-area ratio with 1,600 square feet of living space and 550 square feet of garages on a 1,300 square foot lot. This information is a matter of public record. Aside from the issue of common standards of fairness and decency, I am concerned about the precept of due process as being fully observed here. I raise this question not as an attorney, but as a citizen who believes due process simply means that every citizen is treated the same way under commonly agreed upon laws. It's beyond the limits of my understanding why the Bella Vista project should have been allowed exceptions to building requirements, and then those residents be given the power to deny similar treatment to other prospective builders. That smacks of favoritism. That completes my statement. I'm available for questions.
Thank you. Rob DiNapoli, followed by Deborah Chin.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name's Rob DiNapoli. I've lived on Bella Vista, 322 Bella Vista for 15 years now. My property that my wife and I and son live in is directly across the street from the proposed properties. I'm in opposition to the development of the properties. I'm an avid cyclist, and I travel that street, walk that street down to Los Gatos High School at least 4 times a day, mostly in the morning. So I am a walking witness to the traffic that takes place, mostly in the morning, but really in the afternoon and even on the weekends when people are rushing to Los Gatos High School. Counter to that is that this Bella Vista that we live on serves as a very important corridor for pedestrian and bicycle traffic. The people that use this, and they're literally hundreds and hundreds per day, avoid the busy Los Gatos Boulevard and 2 of the 4-way stop signs and the notorious Highway 9 and Los Gatos Boulevard intersection that is extremely busy. So we've got people racing to school, and also it serves as a corridor. It really is a service to the city of Los Gatos. It's important. It does take traffic off of Los Gatos Boulevard. So we feel, and I feel personally, that I can attest to the traffic concerns that go on that street. I can attest to the importance of that corridor and keeping people on their bicycles and on their and walking. But I think that this council owes us, if you are going to build those houses there, and I can't see why you would. This is virtually a cliff. It's full of these old-growth, beautiful oak trees, and it looks directly down into the windows of a whole apartment and condominium complex. But if you do build, decide to approve the houses, it should be without any modifications or variances. We do not need 2 oversized houses with their families, cars parked on the street, and it sits directly on a blind curve on Bella Vista. I'm right there. My window, my bedroom window looks out right across the street to the facility, to the houses. And I am a walking hazard to those high school kids that drive fast down there. I've gotten in my car several times and followed them down to the high school and yelled at them. And I wave my arms when I'm walking back from the gym in the morning. So I know it's hazardous. If there is a report that says there hasn't been an accident there, it's simply because there have not been 2 houses directly across the street from me on that blind turn. That's the only reason there hasn't been an accident on that street. And people like myself and others on the street that try to keep those high school kids slowed down. So thank you.
Thank you. Deborah Chin, followed by, looks like Edgar Corral.
Good evening. My name is Deborah Chin, and I live at 154 Maggie Court. That's directly below the proposed development. In his letter of appeal submitted March 22nd, Dan Ross cites as justification, and I quote, "We have been denied exceptions that have been granted to seemingly every other dwelling in this neighborhood." And then I'm going to quote from the staff report dated March 29th recommending denial of this appeal. "When a development proposal is made, it is considered independent of previous application and is based on the individual site characteristics and constraints. The extreme slope of the hill, the large amount of protected trees, proximity to our townhomes, and zoning in an area protected by the hillside standards and guidelines make this property uniquely constrained. Yet the size of the current proposed homes is still more than 3 times the allowable FAR. Dan Ross is an experienced developer who purchased a property after a previous owner failed to get his plans approved by the town council due to the excessive size, and after the hillside guidelines were passed. As custodians for the community, you as members of the town council must weigh the merits of each project. While other developments have met with some opposition from neighbors, there's been some benefits to the community that have balanced some of the negative aspects. In this case, neighbors will suffer significant negative impacts, as you've heard, on safety, traffic, and privacy. Yet there are no mitigating factors that would suggest that this proposal be allowed. There is no senior housing units, there's no low-income housing units, no donations to the town, and no ecological preservation. I acknowledge that the applicant has a right to build something on this property. However, it's clear that no one benefits from the proposed development but Dan Ross in this case. I also am asking you to accept the Planning Commission's recommendation to deny the project, support the staff recommendation to deny the appeal. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chin. Edgar Corral, followed by Art Adams.
Ed Corral, 160 Mega Court. I understand Mr. Ross has the legal right to build something on his lots, as long as he adheres to all the rules, guidelines, and standards established by the town of Los Gatos. Any decision other than a denial would be 180 relative to the Planning Commission's 5-0 vote to deny the applicant. It's just unbelievable that we're here again. A decision by the council other than an outright denial would frankly be wrong. That's it.
Thank you. Art Adams, followed by Richard Allen.
Good evening. My name is Art Adams. I live at 380 Bella Vista, and I spent a good part of the last 6 months of last year going to a number of meetings put on by the Town of Los Gatos Traffic Commission. The Traffic Commission had done an extensive survey. At each one of these meetings took about 2 hours, and there were about 4 members of the town staff of Los Gatos. You must have spent thousands of dollars doing this. And the result of this was that it was declared this street is unsafe. The traffic's too fast. Something's got to be done about the unsafe traffic. Out of these meetings came the solution: speed bumps will be put in. That's going to be more thousands of dollars. Why would you spend all these thousands of dollars, hours of your staff's time, and then totally disregard it and say we're going to put in 2 houses on a blind corner? More cars, more parking. Doesn't make sense. Thank you.
Thank you. And Richard Allen, and this is the last card I have. If you wish to speak on this issue, please make sure you get, but you're part of the applicant.
Good evening. I'm Richard Allen. I live at 172 College Avenue. Last January, Pat Tillman wrote a letter detailing 13 reasons to disapprove the Bella Vista development. I hope you've all read that. It's very good. Nothing substantial has changed since that letter was written. I attended the Planning Commission meeting in question. This developer chose to ignore the directions of the Planning Commission and the legitimate concerns of residents of Maggie Court and Bella Vista. Now he comes to this council appealing the Commission's decision, having made no significant changes to his proposal. The record clearly shows the safety, privacy, drainage problems with this development. It's also clear that this development would violate the town's own rules in many areas. I urge this council to put an end to this by rejecting this appeal once and for all. Thank you.
Thank you. No other questions? Okay, last call. Any public? All right, I'm going to ask the applicant to come back up. You'll have 5 minutes for rebuttal.
Thank you. I'll start with, we're all aware this is a challenging site, and I'm not an experienced developer. I don't have a development track record. I did the home that I live in on Villa, but prior to that, I've not developed homes in Los Gatos. I've not developed homes in San Jose, where I do happen to own rental properties, but I've never developed homes. So we worked through the process, doing a few different iterations over time, working with plan staff to the point where we received an approval in October for the first planning commission, an approval recommendation from town staff, knowing that we had some complications. And we got to the point where we had enough work done where it made sense to go to the commission and to get their feedback. At that point, we got a directive to make a significant reduction with no other communication or direction. In our mind, we had already done a significant reduction by taking 8 feet out of the width of each home. Then between the October meeting and the next meeting, we took a 6 by 20 foot area out of the rear of the rear area of the homes for 339. So in our minds, we had already done reductions, and we didn't know what else or where else to turn. So it wasn't our intention to ignore the commission. It's just we didn't have clear direction at that time. And I think, in hindsight, I wish we would have kept those lines of communication open at that time and maybe had the ability to go back to them with clear direction. And then I'm just going to go off some bullet points on some of the comments tonight. For traffic safety, we provided the report tonight that there's no accidents in the general area of our site. There are not any traffic citations in the general area of our site. Town Public Works have asked us to widen the berm where cars currently park on the dirt. So we're going to, what is now dirt will be asphalt, which is going to widen the area of the road in that, on that portion. In regards to our lot line adjustment, the previous application was one house across both lots, and it was an incomplete application, was the purpose for the denial. Town staff recommended that 2 smaller homes would be more proportionate and better fit into the neighborhood. So that was the direction that we took. And there is a provision for a lot line adjustment that is legal. Town's comment to us was that, especially if it were to create 2 more proportionate homes, and if it would add any other benefit, in this case, we're going to save the primary oak tree that just naturally happens to sit between the 2 parcels. Also, there was comments about save the trees. This allows us to save the primary tree. We're also saving the trees that are in existence right now between our structure and the townhome structure. That's going to create natural screening. It will be augmented with a landscape plan that we've submitted. Those trees that are in existence now are also taller than the homes that we're proposing. So our homes will fit under the canopy. Our FAR is compatible with the neighborhood in terms of our Florida area ratio and our lot coverage. We're at about 35%. Our setback request is also compatible. The driveway, 7 out of the 10 homes are closer to the edge of pavement. The homes and garages are closer to the edge of pavement than our proposal. The notion of FAR, we understand it's complicated. That the neighbors would prefer that we build an 800 square foot home, but an 800 square foot home on stilts also isn't a solution. I also want to comment that the neighbors have had my contact information since 2008. Whether I gave it to them or this project has been public enough that it would be easy to find me. These plans have been on file. Not a single neighbor has reached out to have a one-on-one meeting with me to try to arrive at solutions to these complicated challenges. And that's something that I'd like to change. I think it makes sense for us. It would help decrease the anger around some of these issues if we had a chance to sit across a table and figure out best practices there. In closing, I'd like to state that we'd like to be remanded back to the Planning Commission. We can eliminate the 2 feet at the back of our home, and we'd like to come back with something that's compatible with the square footage of the townhomes below. Thank you.
Okay. Questions of the applicant? Councilmember Leonardis.
Is it a good time for disclosures?
Yeah, why don't we do that? Go ahead and we'll let you start.
I met with Mr. Ross and his wife more than once, and I also met with the neighbors of Maggie Court and some residents of Bella Vista.
Okay.
I met with the appellant and visited the site, both top and bottom.
I met with the appellant. I saw the site from Mary Bottomy's and Forest Straits townhomes, and then I went back on my own on Bella Vista to check out the site.
And I met with the applicant, or the appellant in this case, 2 times. And I also visited the site a number of times. I was actually in Mary's home as well. This was previously. And I have spent a lot of time below the site, behind the high school baseball diamond, actually, to observe what the impacts are of similar homes on the south side of Bella Vista.
And I met with the appellant and his wife once, and then the appellant a second time, and I've visited the site a number of times, both from the above and from the street below. Councilmember Leonardis, did you also have a question or not?
I want to hold off for now.
Okay. Any other questions of the appellant? I think we're good. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to close the public hearing at this time and turn to council for questions, discussion, or a motion. It's only 8:30. Councilmember McNutt.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to ask staff to clarify 2 or 3 kind of grounding principles of this discussion. And when I say staff, I probably don't mean you. I probably mean the attorney and the manager. So let's start with the basics. The buildability of this lot. So this is private property, not really a green belt. We've heard it described as a challenging site or unfit for development. So the first question on this discussion is this a buildable lot?
Two ways to approach that. I'll deal from the planning perspective, and the town attorney may want to address any legal issues that arise. The lots are legal lots. They exist as they are, as legal lots that under existing town codes, something could be built on them, and the town could not prevent that from occurring. Whether they are financially viable based on the purchase price and the construction costs is beyond the town's ability to regulate or control. But they are 2 legal lots that do have allowable square footage that could be built on them. And that's kind of the answer from the planner's perspective.
And from the legal perspective, the answer is very similar, is that they were properly subdivided at that time, certainly within the council's discretion, whether or not to grant the current request for the lot line adjustment to make them more equal so that units can be built of certain size or nature. That's solely within the council's discretion. But as the manager indicated, that the existing 2 lots are valid subdivided lots within the town of Los Gatos. And then from there, the council then needs to look at the standards that are applicable as to what can be built on those lots.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. The second issue, so we have a ground here that they're buildable lots. The second thing that I keep hearing come up, not so much tonight as much as in the transcripts of the Planning Commission and in the correspondence, and I hear this from both points of view, both sides of this issue. This idea of precedents and exceptions. So precedent being both, if an exception has been granted here, is it only fair or precedent that the same exception be available here? And if an exception is granted here, does that mean that future exceptions will automatically be granted in another case? So can you, I know you had some language in the staff report, but since it does keep coming up as an area of concern, can you walk through that just a little bit and clarify?
Just to refresh the public and council, at the end of the staff report, we did cite that when a development proposal is made, it is considered independent of previous applications and is based on the individual site characteristics and constraints. Approval of any of the requested acceptance, the variance, reduced setbacks, and/or lot line adjustment would not set a precedent if appropriate findings are made that are specific to this proposal and property.
Just as a follow-up, that this council has dealt with on many occasions in the community, just like other communities, when you look at a land use matter and an application for development, what matters is what's in place at time. So if you take an older neighborhood like Bella Vista or a lot of other neighborhoods in Los Gatos, or a newer neighborhood but it has undergone modifications or change, what you always have to look at before you even get to that decision is, what are the rules in place at the time that the application comes in? What are the rules in place that are applicable to the subject application? So the mere fact that there have been exceptions in the past in a neighborhood are not necessarily applicable to a future project if the rules have changed in the interim. So what the first thing that the council or the planning commission always has to look at, as do the planners, are what are the rules in place when the application comes in. So the mere fact that something was built on the same neighborhood or the same street or even next door at a prior time or even a future time, if the rules are different, then that doesn't create the ground rules for what happens at the current time and the current rules. Thank you, Mayor. I'll let others go now.
Okay. Other questions of staff? Councilmember Brzezinski.
Yeah, yes. I'd like to talk about 145 Bella Vista, if I might. This is used as a model for the recommendations regarding these two properties. And in visiting this street and being present, particularly down in the south end, I do think that there are some major constraints that are evident on Bella Vista and in the south area that are generated by the proximity of the homes to the street, that is the homes on the hillside, and also the driveways that are in those homes, particularly 145 and 143. We have received input from one of the neighbors noting that it's a very constrained section of the street, that because of the narrowness of the street at that point and the way the homes are situated along Bella Vista, that it becomes very, very difficult to actually traverse that street in a vehicle. And add to that then the question of bicycle and pedestrian frequency. It seems to me that would not be an area we would want to replicate on the north side. Now, when the staff viewed this particular home, 145, as a sample to be replicated, was the staff's feeling that the design, particularly the driveway design, was adequate and appropriate, or were there some concerns at that point raised to the applicant?
First of all, when 145 Bella Vista was, when the house was reconstructed, I believe the garage was left intact. And so that parking and driveway and garage scenario was a pre-existing remaining condition. I didn't personally have a conversation with the applicant about that address. That is the most recent application on that side of Bella Vista, and it was probably at least 10 years old. So it can be used as an example of a similar type of lot, and you can look at how things were done on that lot for assistance in designing plans. But we still want to look at each site individually, and if something doesn't work on a site, we definitely wouldn't want to necessarily replicate that or follow that on another lot. So the circumstances aren't exactly the same. There's similarities, and it can be used as an example in a way of designing a house that fits the site and steps down the slope. I don't think we would ever want to say, that's what you have to build here. It's just, we point to past developments to try to assist an applicant, show them where something was maybe done well or not done well, and we still have to come back and at the end of the day and look at their particular plans and determine whether that's appropriate for that particular site. And I would, on the traffic issue, if there's an issue with the backup and the driveways and all that, we certainly wouldn't want to set up that same kind of scenario.
Okay.
We try to put these driveways in the most appropriate location on these lots, given the particulars in the street and where they tie in and everything.
From your perspective on the hillside, how do you compare the hillside of the application to the hillside at 145, 143 in terms of, and frankly, I was having difficulty trying to make the comparison because the houses, of course, filled the lot. So in terms of slope, in terms of distance from the street to the rear of the homes, for example, any thoughts on that?
I don't know what the average slope is on those two properties, and I could potentially look at town topo and come back with that information, but I can't off the top of my head tell you what the slope is on those properties. The proximity to the street, we did look at all of the homes on that side of Bella Vista, how close they were to the edge of pavement in terms of the house setback and the garage, looking at the driveway depth. So we did compare it for those purposes to show that the majority of the homes on that side have short driveways, are built relatively close to the street, up where it's a little flatter, and then the houses were stepping down the slope. So that was the one comparison we did use it for.
All right, thank you.
Councilmember Leonardis.
Thank you. A couple of questions for staff. So I also walked behind 145 Bella Vista to try to make a comparison, and was just wondering, how do we actually verify the slope of a property? Do we rely on information that the applicant provides to us, or do we actually go out there and measure it ourselves?
Typically, the information is provided by the applicant. I don't know when 145 was developed. I'd have to pull the plans out and actually look and see what was submitted at that time. But we do require topo on slope properties, and if staff has a reason to check it, we sometimes do. We have engineering consultants that we'll use to check topo and check average slope calcs if we have any reason to suspect that it's not accurate information. But it is supplied by the applicant and then checked by staff.
Another question.
Go ahead.
Mr. Tillman mentioned that part of the applicant's driveway is going to be in the public right-of-way. So my question is, number one, is that true? Number two, what mechanism will we be using to grant the easement, or if we are deeding town land to the applicant?
There is not any transfer of land. The driveway would connect from the existing edge of pavement to the property and to the face of garage, and that is the situation for all properties along a public right-of-way. Sometimes the driveway connection is shorter than it is here, but this pavement edge is actually fairly well set back from the edge of property. I'm guessing it's maybe between 10 and 15 feet away. So they have to make the connection from the edge of pavement to the property, onto the property to get to the garage, regardless of where the garage is located. So that would just stay within the public right-of-way. The reason there's a variance for driveway length is because the applicant is not providing the total 18 feet on the project site, and they're relying on the segment that's being done for the connection to provide that length.
All right, thank you. And one more, if I may.
Please.
When I look at the staff report on page 4, and we look at section 2410.040, and it talks about modifications to a subdivision, this kind of strikes me as being applicable to raw land, as if you were taking a parcel of land and then dividing it. And since this particular property was subdivided in 1938, how applicable is this today?
The lots are, you're correct, the lots aren't being created today, but the provision in here was being provided in the event that a lot line adjustment is done. This code section has, allows the deciding body the discretion to approve that lot line adjustment, even though one of the lots would become more non-conforming, one would become less non-conforming. So that component of it is discretionary. And if the council as deciding body doesn't feel that there's adequate findings, the lot line adjustment wouldn't be approved. And the lots would stay the existing sizes that they are.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions of staff? Comments? Somebody can hum the Jeopardy theme. Councilmember Brzezinski.
I like to see you squirm, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
It's,
it was sun I was in today.
Yeah. Well, it brings us to, I think, the necessity of a decision. And I want to make sure we're all aware of, of what the options are for us. The applicant, the appellant in this case, made an appeal on the basis that the Planning Commission erred or abused its discretion. And we have very significant limits on what we can and cannot do in relationship to a Planning Commission decision. Given that that's the appeal, then we would have to find error. I have difficulty validating the error of the commission that is proposed. I think as I read the Planning Commission motion, it did reference to, or I believe it was Ms. Sayak who referenced to 2,400 square feet, but in a context of the project in general. It wasn't exclusive of the FAR. As far as the variance for rear setback, the variance not being requested, but the issue, I believe, was the setback, and whether that was a misstatement of a verbal miscue, or it was in the context of giving a general orientation to an area of difficulty. I don't see this as being an error in the legal sense. The safety of the driveways, and then the opposition of the project by the neighbors, both cited, but I think there was opposition by the neighbors. I think that was quite clear. And tonight, I must say that I appreciated the rational and in some way sensitive approach taken by all of those on both sides who presented to this body. So that I don't find that the decision of the commission was an error. I think what they were asking, if it were to get to council, that we would look at those things that were of concern to them. One is the mass of the house, the size and mass of the house. That would include the siding on the property and all of the things that come with the massing, including tree removal, the proximity to the street and so forth, the proximity to the houses on the west side. The request being to reduce that mass significantly. I know the applicant was concerned about how you define significant, and frankly, since we don't design from the dais, we probably won't give you a number. But I do think that the issue as being requested by the Planning Commission was reduce the size of the house to a degree that would be significant. And that would be something that would be reviewed subsequent to the reworking of the plan. As far as the rear yard setback goes, that's very much related to one of the issues of the hillside guidelines, which is protection of the neighbors. And there is a pre-existing condition, and that is the Maggie Court community exists. They exist whether you agree or disagree with any exceptions that might have been made when that was developed in the 90s. I believe it was in the 90s, somewhere in the early 90s or mid-90s, is irrelevant at this point because it does pre-exist, and now we have to protect those individuals in their community. I live very approximate to this project. I live over on the boulevard. I'm very concerned about traffic, as you can imagine, but I'm also very observant of Caldwell and Bella Vista and this hillside into town. And even though there may not be any evidence of accidents, I do know that there's great potential for accidents. And I think we, knock on wood, the fact that we haven't had reports of accidents is something that is significant. But by observation, it's clear that there are traffic issues. And as was pointed out, we are doing some traffic calming as a result of our own studies that determine that there are issues of speeds of traffic and volumes of traffic there. And then in terms of being swayed by the opposition, we read everything. We read all the letters, we read all the emails, we read all the documents. This was Sunday. The opportunity we have at this end of the process is to see the entire presentation. And so I don't think that that anybody, whether it's the Planning Commission or the Council, is easily swayed by the points of view that are raised. We don't really say how many people are in favor, how many people are against. It's the numbers in favor that we will go with. We don't operate that way, and I think we've been very consistent that way. So for me, it seems that the council has only one opportunity tonight to recommend, and that is to deny the appeal and uphold the Planning Commission. And I'm going to make that motion at this time.
We have a motion. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Leonardis.
I will second that.
Okay. Vice Mayor.
Thank you. Now that we have a motion on the table, just to put this in context, we are looking at an appeal, which means we are determining whether or not the Planning Commission erred. And as you sit out there, you can probably appreciate that we have several inches of paper that we have looked through. As Mr. Brzezinski said, we have a lot of information here. We have read the transcript or looked at the streaming video of 2 Planning Commission meetings. And for myself, visiting the site, both the way it looks at the visual from Bella Vista looking down, and also from the 2 townhouses I went into and looked at the way the hillside looks from those townhomes, looking onto the hillside. All of that is very powerful. And what I was specifically examining was the motion by the Planning Commission, the motion that eventually carried. And with that, it was Ms. Sayak, and she was very specific. She said that she couldn't approve the lot line adjustment because you can't do that when it makes the lots more non-conforming. She spoke to not wanting to create a greater deviation on the rear setback. Architecture and site was the most significant because she was looking at the floor area ratio. And so you're looking at if you combine the home and the cellar or basement and the And the garage, you're looking at numbers of 3,000 versus 1,000. I mean, it's a significant difference. She was looking at bulk and mass. And then when she got to the variance, her point was that if you don't need the variance for the driveway, if you're not going to be approving the homes per the earlier part of her motion. So the bottom line is those were the bases of her motion. That was the motion that was seconded and carried unanimously. And I find no error under our laws and our ordinances to grant the appeal in this case.
Anybody else? Councilmember McNutt?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a question of staff. So if this motion carries, the applicant appellant still owns the land. And so what would be his options then for going forward?
They could file a new application at any time. So a new architecture and site application could be filed for a different project or a variation of this project. It'd be a new application, new fee, new process.
You look like you want to say something, Mr. Anderson.
Obviously, the applicant, if this is denied, would have the rights to take their property and to file for whatever permit is appropriate that they think is, that they'd like to bring forward for planning commission or council review. Fees are calculated on a number of ways. There are flat fees based on periodic studies the town does. There are also time and material fee bases that staff will use. Given a lot of the prep work that has been done previously on this application, it may make sense, and that staff has that discretion to apply time and materials or the fee basis on a case-by-case basis, or the council could direct such.
Councilmember Brzezinski.
As the maker of the motion, let's just take up that last piece then. This has been a long and arduous process for all parties involved. Okay? And I've got to assume that there are some significant parts of this that have already been accomplished by the applicant as a result of going through this process in relationship to our expectations of fee service and so forth. I would think that some of that can be accommodated if indeed the applicant comes back for another run at this with the staff, that some of this material is still current and can be applied. But I would not want any donation of public staff time that goes beyond what would be, standard for all applicants. I'm thinking the recommendation or the option that the manager presented of time and materials, I believe you said, which would be time of staff, and any new materials that occur would have to be accommodated by the fee schedule. Okay, I don't think that if indeed the applicant comes back that there should be a penalty because the person is coming back.
And in particular, under that approach, any third-party contractors such as the consulting architect, any arborist review, anything that the town engages that has an expense, including noticing of residents for any future application, all those costs would be directly passed on as with any application.
Okay, well, I would like to include that in my motion if the motion seconder is interested.
I will second that.
Okay, any further discussion? Councilmember McNutt.
Thank you, Mayor. So I will be supporting the motion, but I wanted to take this opportunity to use an old trendy phrase of paradigm shift, which is what I think everyone who's involved and concerned about this project needs to experience. What we've heard is that it is a private property buildable lot, which means the people who live on the east side of Bella Vista at some point they're going to look out and they're going to see a house. Now, what that looks like, how big it is, whether it's surrounded by trees, that's all yet to be determined. But The open view that you've experienced for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, at some point is going to change because legally the property owner has the right to do that. The folks who live down below and are used to looking up the hill, and I live in a canyon, I'm used to looking up a hill, at some point you're going to see a house there. It's not going to look like that, probably, but there will be probably at some point in time some type of home built there. So kind of shifting the paradigm of what you have been experiencing. For the property owner, the same thing. Everyone talks about how this is a difficult site. It's a challenging site. And I have absolutely zero experience in architecture and engineering, but it seems to me that the more difficult and challenging and unusual the site, the more you need to use unusual architectural approaches to that. I don't know what it would look like. I don't know how big it would be, how it would be sited, but taking a breath, for everyone taking a breath, kind of clearing your mind, doing a paradigm shift, and starting afresh, I think, might end up with a project that is acceptable to the goals of the property owner, acceptable to the neighbors, knowing that change, for some, any change is going to be difficult. But I do think that if everyone works hard and works creatively and works cooperatively, that there can be a solution developed that works for everybody.
Okay, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of the motion to deny the appeal signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We're going to take a 5-minute break before we go back to the consent items that were pulled. I'm going to call us back to order. And we have both consent agenda items pulled. First item was the minutes pulled by Lee Quintana. And I do not see her. Madam Attorney.
Let the record reflect that the town manager went out in the hallway to locate the speaker, Ms. Quintana, to see if she was available to speak on the item. And from the report from town manager indicates that she was not visible out in the hallway.
And for the record, item 1 was the minutes of the March 19th meeting. So I'll entertain a motion to approve agenda item 1. Councilmember Leonardis.
Move to approve agenda item 1.
Second.
Motion and a second by Councilmember Przinski. Any discussion? Seeing none, those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Second item, item number 2, which is PPW job 12-01 pageant grounds renovation project 411-825-2501. And here, who pulled? Councilmember Przinski, and then the staff is Christy Walter.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, would you like my reason for pulling?
I'd love your reason for
All right.
pulling.
Simply when I read this consent item, something jumped out at me on page 2, midway through I guess it would be the third paragraph, where the upper level, this is a quote now, the upper level will have a stamped concrete patio to accommodate events and feature trellis located and so forth. And frankly, that was a trigger for me to look at the plan, which I hadn't looked at before I saw that particular piece. And that's when I discovered that indeed the conceptual landscape design has a stamped concrete pad right there at the upper level of the park. I was just assuming that was grass when I looked at it the first, because it's number 10 and it says main patio area could be used for anything and it doesn't indicate stamped concrete. So that note in the staff report was what triggered my concern. So I guess I would like to know more about that and what was proposed, and we probably will be reflecting on whether I think there could be an alternate to that.
Okay. There were several reasons that the architect recommended hardscape surface in that particular area. His feeling was strong that the area up on the upper area of the pageant grounds would not work well for a natural turf due to lack of sunlight, as well as the prevalence of surface roots in the area. That is consistent with staff's observations and past experience. And given the proposed use for the area being for events, there was some additional concern that foot traffic and that use would create additional challenges for maintaining natural turf in that area. There is several different additional vegetation options proposed surrounding the stamped concrete area to preserve the area as a park-like atmosphere. I did bring some of that information with me. There are 9 western redbuds proposed. Those are obviously larger trees, and 2 London plane trees that are at the below section. There are over 400 shrubs in the area surrounding both the upper and lower area, and particularly in the upper area, there are over 200 shrubs that are proposed, again, to soften the hardscape, to create greenery in the area, and to maintain the park-like atmosphere while still, I guess, maintaining a surface in the area on the upper section that would be conducive to, or most conducive to, special events and the uses that are proposed for the site.
Vice Mayor Spector.
I don't have questions of staff. I have a comment. How do you want us to go? Should we do questions of staff first?
Go right ahead.
All right, since, everybody out there.
The throngs in the audience.
It was actually that same part of the staff report that Mr. Przinski mentioned that got my attention. And as a result, I came in before the closed session and looked at all of the plans with regard to this item. And my concern was, and I was going to pull it from the consent calendar, but Mr. Przinski beat me to it. My concern was that this park, Pageant Park, has historically been a very, I consider, beautiful, wooded, pastoral kind of park. And so I knew that we had to do ADA modifications. That I understood. But then when I came in and I looked at the big plans, I asked the town manager, and where's the lawn? And he said, there is no lawn. And that really gave me pause. I mean, basically what we have is hardscape. What I'm hearing now is that this is for the proposed use of events. Maybe I was asleep at the wheel when we made that decision to have hardscape for proposed use for events. But my take right now is I would really like it to be, have lawn, grass, to be more green.
Councilmember Przinski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That was exactly my feeling, and I actually had a conversation with the manager earlier today. I took the plan, I went down to the library, went up to the second floor, went to the west windows and looked out over the park. And it's a park. And the upper area is lawn. And it's very attractive, and it's very inviting, and it is a park. And I think that I had the same feeling, obviously, without knowing that the vice mayor was going to see something similar. I had the same feeling that, we would be losing something here for the sake of gaining an activities or events venue. And I, too, didn't remember that our primary intent was to create an events venue in Pageant Park. We have used it for events. We've used it when we do our senior luncheon. But we do use the lawn when we set up the tables and chairs. And I really don't imagine that Pageant Park will have the same degree of use that Plaza Park does, for example. And I know Plaza Park, we have difficulty with our lawn. And it also has trees. And it also has shade, and besides huge numbers of feet all over it. But we would never in 1,000 years recommend that we pave Pageant Park because it's difficult or pave Plaza Park because it's difficult to maintain the lawn. We're going to continue to struggle with that. I see this as asking us to continue a portion of it as lawn. And when I looked out of the second story of the library and tried to visualize a stamped concrete pad, I really think that we would be losing something. So my recommendation, and I don't know exactly what direction we would want to take this, but my recommendation would be that we go back to staff, take another look at this, talk to the architect about it, see what we can do. I think as I look at the rest of the plan, it looks really good. There's no question of that being a great plan, but I could also see the loss of the lawn for the sake of the stamped concrete as being a real deficiency in the plan.
Councilmember Leonardis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also looked at the plan and noticed that there was a significant amount of concrete, and perhaps as an alternative to real grass, we can use synthetic turf, or at least explore the use of synthetic turf. I know this is something that we've never tried before, but a lot of the stuff they have now is very real looking, and it could provide dual purposes where it will always stay green and pretty, yet it will not have to be replaced over and over or watered.
Mr. Manager.
I'll actually share that in my meeting with the landscape architect, he said that if the town wanted a turf-like feel, he recommended non-natural turf, and I kind of suggested that probably would not be appropriate, but that was his recommendation given the challenges of the site for growing turf. So.
Councilmember Leonardis.
I know that, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, just an idea to possibly explore. I realize that it's something we've never done before, and maybe it's time, or maybe if it doesn't look right, we can go back to the old way. But I think it might be a viable solution in this case.
Okay. So is this, would you like to make somebody want to make a motion as to how to address this, Councilmember
I'll
Brzezinski?
comment to this last issue. Hadn't thought of it. Would have to think about it. We're not going to design it tonight, but as an option the staff wants to explore, or come back to us and say, you know, we're going to stick with our stamped concrete, and here are all the better reasons that we want to do it. I mean, I would like to hear what the staff has to say. I know this is going to push back the completion of the park for a period of time, but I think it's such a significant asset to the community that I'd rather take a little bit more time to determine what we want than to push to closure without having that time. So I guess that would be my recommendation, to return this to staff. I'll make this as a motion. Return the PPW job number 1201, the Pageant Grounds renovation project, 411-825-2501, to staff for further evaluation and return to council with a revised plan, particularly focusing on the issue of the main patio area that is currently indicated as stamped concrete.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a second. Mr. Manager?
Just on the implementation, designing 3 sets of plans and specs to bring forward, one for turf, we already have the one done for stamped concrete, and one for artificial turf. That just entails more architectural work and design. I might suggest we come back first for a policy direction on whether you want turf, stamped concrete, or artificial turf, pros and cons of each. You make a decision there, then we bring back the plans and specs for that. Or do you see 3 sets of plans and specs coming back and you choose which one you want that night? It's more work by the architect.
I'd prefer your first alternative, but I'll look to the motion maker.
The first alternative being?
Pros and cons of each one for policy direction and then plans.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking 3 sets of plans.
Okay.
I mean, I wasn't looking at that. Frankly, you're going to have to do some real convincing to get me to buy into concrete. So,
And that one's already done. There's
yeah.
no work on that.
So I think it would be the issue of pros and cons, you know, because we really do not have a real developed orientation to both natural turf and artificial, and perhaps a little bit more information on the artificial.
Okay.
You know, I mean, we are going to do it with our sports park.
Yeah. And the architect put that on the table, and we could always have him prepare the pros and cons. So.
Okay. Vice Mayor Spector.
Thank you. I was not anticipating 3 sets of plans either. I mean, maybe it's simplistic, and maybe this is why you don't design from the dais, but we have renderings in black and white, and it just seems like you can say, okay, well, this is, it's white now. And then you put green, and it's, this is with lawn. Now, quite frankly, if there's other places to put lawn, I'm not against that either. And then you have a verbal discussion of real grass versus artificial grass. I was not thinking of artificial. When I first heard Mr. Leonardis say it, there was a little hesitancy, but I think that we need to have an open mind as a council and consider it.
One of the benefits of artificial, although it's more expensive than natural, I assume, is that you don't have to water it that much.
Maintenance is a lot easier.
Probably not at all, actually, but and that eliminates all the irrigation issues that might occur. So, interesting thought, but again, not designing from here. I'd like to hear pros and cons.
And mostly what I'm trying to say is it will be a 3-step process. One step will be to come and get direction on turf versus natural turf versus artificial turf. then to bring back the plans and specs to go out to bid, and then your approval of the bid. And I just wanted to clarify that. We weren't going to try to do plans and specs on each option and bring those back to you.
Okay. Councilmember Leonardis.
I also agree that we do not need 3 sets of plans. I think you have the patio already, the stamped concrete already, and then just one turf plan, be it artificial or real. And I don't know if there's any economies of scale to be achieved by the same the installer that would be putting it in the sports complex or not. That might be something we want to look at.
Okay. So there's a motion. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Manager.
We will probably try to come back within 1 or 2 council meetings for the policy direction, because then we'll have to have the architecture work done. And it's not so much the plans that you will see, it's all the specifications that go out to bid, where the irrigation lines go, what the subsurface will look like, what grading and fill will be required. That all has to be done before we can get bids. Otherwise, the bids will be all over the board and incompatible. So it's more the specs. And so we'll come back for the policy direction on the turf solution as quickly as we can bring it to you. Then we'll work with the architect to come up with the detailed plans and specs that you approve before they go out to bid. We will also look at solutions when we do go out to bid to accelerate the process, either an ad alternate to meet a certain timeline or something like that, to see if that's possible. Using an existing contractor might have savings of time and money, so we'll look at all those options when we bring back the plans and specs.
Councilmember Brzezinski.
And I don't think anyone here has said that the conceptual landscape design as it exists is inappropriate. And we're just talking about that one section. I would like to make this as least complicated as possible. You know, we're talking about a lawn here, okay? I bet you there are some people in town who could actually lay PVC and saw it over the top of it if we asked them. So I don't see this as that complicated a mix. I think the general design is very good, and it's kind of the completion of what we've already started. So, like I say, if we can facilitate this, simplify it, I think I'd prefer to go there.
Okay. Seeing nobody else. Oh.
I just wanted to add one clarification that we do also need to do an addendum to the current contract with the architect in order to move forward with any of the work, even the evaluation of turf, which I do think it would be most beneficial to have him do that analysis for us, but we need to go through that step before we can proceed any further.
Okay. Motion on the floor. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Attorney just had a great idea.
Before we go to the motion? I didn't hear anybody say anything.
Trying not to belabor this, but given the fact that there may be a contract amendment, and I'm not sure the amount yet, and whether it's in the manager's authority, perhaps the maker of the motion might want to consider, and the council might want to consider some sort of authorization within a reasonable amount to delegate that to the manager so that we don't find ourselves delayed even more bringing in a contract amendment back to council.
Refresh my memory, if I might.
Please.
What is the manager's limit?
50,000, and we think the work would be less than that. So I think following on the attorney's idea, a delegation. The problem is we can't amend the existing contract with the added work may take it over 50K, and I don't have that authority.
Yeah, well,
So
I tell you.
you work up to my limit.
If I might, I'd do it for under 50K in a heartbeat if you offered it to me, okay? I'm sure I'd be able to find a way to do that. You know, I think that we should be able to do it for under that. Again, simplifying this would be a really good thing, yeah. So it'll include that in the motion.
Okay. Is that agreeable to the second?
Yes.
All right. Now, this time we're going to actually vote on the motion because we didn't do that before. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. That concludes tonight's agenda, and we are adjourned.